He comes back when you're finally over him. Here's why there's a paradox in human relationships that fascinates me and torments many. It's the moment when, just as you've reclaimed your power, rebuilt your sense of self, and stitched together your inner peace, the past reappears. Not as a whisper, but as a knock on the door. Why? Why now? Because desire is drawn to energy. It is attracted not to need, but to wholeness. When we are no longer seeking approval, validation, or closure, that is often when the echo returns. Not because something has changed in the past, but because you have changed in the present. When you were waiting, hoping, yearning, you were energetically tethered. That tether was invisible but palpable, and now you've let go. You've cut the cord, you're no longer signaling. And ironically, that absence creates a vacuum. Some are not drawn to our availability, but to our independence. They are not looking for love, they are looking for proof that they are still wanted, still significant. So they knock, and you wonder, is it fate? Is it unfinished business? Or is it the universe testing your growth? When we speak of desire, we often misunderstand its nature. We think it arises purely from physical attraction or shared memories, but desire in its truest, most magnetic form is drawn to energy, and more specifically, it is drawn to wholeness. When a person is rooted in themselves, when they are no longer searching outward for something to complete them, that groundedness creates an invisible pulse. It says, I am not in need, I am not waiting, I am already enough. This kind of inner equilibrium is incredibly powerful because it's rare. So much of what we're taught about love is tethered to longing. We think wanting someone means needing them. We believe that to love is to surrender our wholeness in service of connection. But real desire, enduring desire, doesn't thrive in lack. It thrives in the space where autonomy and intimacy meet. When someone witnesses your completeness, your ability to stand alone, that's when they're often most compelled. Because wholeness is not only attractive, it's evocative. It stirs the unconscious in others. It reminds them of their own longing to feel full, to feel sovereign. And so they are drawn to your light, not because they want to build with you, but because they want to bask in it. This is why people so often return when you've finally moved on. When you are no longer performing grief, no longer caught in the cycles of checking your phone, questioning your worth, replaying old conversations. Something in you has clicked back into place. You've stopped outsourcing your self-esteem. You're no longer asking to be seen. You're simply living, seen or not. And paradoxically, that is when others start to truly see you. The power dynamic shifts without you even realizing it. When you were waiting, you were in pursuit. You were emitting a frequency of longing. But now, without effort, you have become the one who is pursued. Not because you played a game, not because you engineered distance, but because you healed. And healing, real healing, is magnetizing. It's important to understand this isn't manipulation. You didn't become whole to provoke attention. You became whole because it was time, because your survival, your peace, your life demanded it. And yet, people feel that. They sense your self-possession, your contentment. For some, it triggers admiration. For others, it triggers regret. And in that space of reflection, they may reach out. They may knock at the door they once closed, or the one you finally sealed shut. But what draws them isn't your pain, it's your absence from their emotional orbit, your disinterest. Your quiet refusal to shrink. The truth is, desire does not chase desperation. It chases vitality. And when you've finally found your own, when you are no longer looking back, that's when the past often tries to follow. Not because it has something new to offer, but because it's waking up to what it lost when you remembered who you are. Letting go is not just an emotional decision, it's an energetic one. When we hold on to someone emotionally, even silently, we are still in relationship with them. That relationship may no longer involve communication, physical closeness, or shared routines, but it exists in the invisible spaces, in our thoughts, in our longings, in the what-ifs we replay in our minds. There is a cord, subtle, unseen, that connects us to the person we haven't fully released. And as long as that cord exists, the past is not truly behind us. We are still feeding it with our attention, our stories, our hurt. This is the paradox of letting go. We often think we've moved on because we've stopped talking to someone or because time has passed. But true release happens not when we stop reaching out, but when we stop reaching inward toward them, when they no longer take up residence in our emotional landscape. This is not about denial or repression. It's about no longer assigning meaning to their absence. It's about no longer centering them in the narrative of your healing. When we truly let go, the tether dissolves. We no longer check their social media to see if they are thinking of us. We no longer look for signs in songs or dream interpretations or the sudden memory of their touch. We stop turning every coincidence into a message. We stop carrying the weight of closure that will never come. In this state, we are no longer energetically available. And that absence, that clear space is powerful because the silence speaks. It is not an echo of longing, but the sound of peace. And strangely, it is often in this silence that the past begins to stir, not because it hears your voice calling, but because it feels your voice missing. Absence creates curiosity. It creates discomfort. What was once taken for granted is suddenly inaccessible. What was once waiting is no longer there, and for some people, that shift is more powerful than any confrontation, any declaration of pain, or any attempt at explanation. But this return, when it happens, isn't about love, it's about energetic disruption. The tether is gone, and with it, the unspoken contract that you would remain emotionally available. They may not even understand why they're thinking of you again. They just feel the space where your energy used to be. And in an unconscious way, they move to reclaim it, not always to reconnect, but to reassert a sense of significance. The irony is, this attempt often comes too late. Because once the tether is broken, you are no longer the person you were. You have grown, expanded, become more sovereign. You're not operating in reaction to their presence or absence anymore. And that shift, that inner freedom, is not just liberation for you, it's a statement. It says, I no longer carry what isn't mine. I no longer hold space for someone who let go of me long before I let go of them. There is something deeply paradoxical about human attraction. We often say we want closeness, that we crave connection, that we long for someone who will be emotionally available and open with us. But beneath that conscious desire, many of us are unconsciously drawn to the exact opposite, to distance, to mystery, to the one who remains just out of reach. This is not always about love, it's about power, about the emotional imprint of early experiences, about the need to prove that we are still wanted. And so, we find ourselves pulled not toward who is near, but toward who is no longer looking back. Independence has a strange gravitational pull. When someone stops reaching, stops needing, stops waiting, their emotional detachment often becomes magnetic. Not because they've become cold, but because they've become self-contained. They are no longer defined by the absence of another. They are living fully, without apology, without delay. And that kind of freedom is rare. It can be confronting. It can also be intoxicating. For some, it's not your love that compels them, it's your liberation. The very moment you've stopped hoping they'll return, when your eyes are no longer fixed on the door, they begin to feel your absence. But more importantly, they begin to feel your power. You're no longer participating in the emotional loop, no longer giving them a backstage pass to your inner life. You're no longer waiting, you're not angry, you're just done. And in that quiet finality, something stirs in them. Sometimes it's guilt, sometimes it's curiosity, sometimes it's a need to feel that they still matter to you. People aren't always drawn to love, they're drawn to significance. And when you're no longer offering them that significance, when your gaze has turned inward, when your energy is directed toward your own life, they feel the loss of something they may have never appreciated when it was present. This is not conscious most of the time. They may not say, "I miss how much they loved me." What they feel is the discomfort of no longer being desired, of no longer being the center of someone's emotional world. And so they reach out not always to repair, but to reassert. This is why independence is often mistaken for invitation. Your distance is interpreted as mystery. Your silence is read as strength. Your lack of reaction becomes the most powerful message of all. But it's not a game. It's not manipulation. It's simply you returning to yourself, no longer revolving around someone who was never orbiting you in the first place. What they're drawn to now is what they couldn't recognize before, your wholeness, the self you reclaimed in the absence of their attention. And ironically, it's often not love they're pursuing in that moment, it's relevance. Because once you've found peace within yourself, the one who once left may suddenly wonder how you became someone they now feel compelled to chase. When someone from the past returns, it can be tempting to see it as a sign, as if the universe is validating the depth of your connection or offering a second chance at what was lost. The reappearance can feel like resolution, a kind of closure wrapped in possibility, but the truth is more complicated. The return of someone who once walked away, who once withheld, who once disappeared, that return does not necessarily mean anything has changed. It may not be a sign of transformation. It may simply be a reaction to your distance. There is a fundamental difference between returning out of recognition and returning out of reaction. One stems from growth, the other from discomfort. When someone comes back after you've healed, after you've stopped hoping, after you've quietly reclaimed your life, it can feel like a full circle moment. But in many cases, what they are responding to isn't a new clarity or love, it's a shift in power. They are reacting to the fact that they no longer have access to you, that they can no longer feel your longing, that the space you used to hold for them is now occupied by your own peace. For some people, that peace is disorienting. When you were emotionally available, waiting with open hands and an open heart, they may not have seen you clearly. Your presence was constant and thus invisible, but now in your absence they notice, not because they see your value, but because they feel their loss of influence. It's not that they've had an awakening. It's that they've noticed the quiet withdrawal of something that used to affirm them. The person who returns isn't always returning for you. Sometimes they're returning for themselves, for the feeling of being wanted, being remembered, being central. This is why it's important not to romanticize the return. Not every comeback is a correction. Not every reappearance means there is more story to write. Sometimes it's simply that your silence has become louder than your voice ever was, and that silence creates discomfort. It invites curiosity. It pulls them back, not into love, but into the vacuum they now feel. If you're not careful, you can mistake that return for resolution. You might believe that their presence now means something it didn't before, but the test isn't whether someone comes back. The real test is whether they've grown, whether they now have the capacity to meet you where you are, rather than where they left you. And most importantly, whether you are still open to a dynamic that once required you to shrink. Often, the return is not an invitation to reopen the past, but a mirror showing you how far you've come. It's not about rekindling something, it's about recognizing that you no longer need what once held you. Their return may say something about them, but your response will say everything about you. The most profound change after a heartbreak doesn't happen in the other person, it happens in you. Not in the drama of their return or the silence of their absence, but in the quiet, private work of reclaiming yourself. That transformation isn't loud, it doesn't announce itself, but it is deeply felt. And often, it is only once this shift has taken root within you that the past tries to circle back. Not because you've become available again, but because you are finally free. You are no longer waiting, no longer watching the door, no longer rewriting the story to make sense of what didn't. You are no longer asking questions that go unanswered. You are no longer hoping for a different ending to a chapter that has already closed. This is the essence of your evolution, the moment when the old wound no longer defines you, and your worth is no longer measured through someone else's presence or permission. You've stopped needing them to choose you because you've already chosen yourself, and that shift, that internal reorientation, is not something you need to explain. It radiates, people feel it even if they can't name it. Your energy has changed. You no longer give away your softness in the hope that it will be returned. You no longer shrink to fit into someone else's comfort. You are no longer performing love as a way to earn it. Instead, you're simply being, living, expanding in your own space on your own terms. This is when the past often reemerges. But it's not fate, it's not magic, it's not even timing. It's the energetic ripple of your reclamation. When you were still hoping, there was a kind of reach, a subtle emotional availability that lingered in the background. Even in silence, there was a pull, a low hum of attention directed towards someone else. But now that hum is gone. The signal has gone quiet, and that silence, that absence of emotional labor, becomes unmistakable. Some people come back not because they've changed, but because you have. Because they can feel that they are no longer at the center of your world. Because they no longer have access to your thoughts, your hopes, your energy. And that loss, not of love, but of control, can be deeply unsettling. For them, not for you, because the return doesn't destabilize you anymore. It doesn't hook you. You've already done the work. You've already rebuilt. And here lies the most important truth. The disappearance of someone who once sway is not story. The real story is your healing, your detachment, your strength that didn't come from moving on quickly, but from moving inward deeply. The return may appear significant, but the true shift is not who comes back. It's that you are no longer the person who waits for them. You don't need to go backward. You are no longer holding a space that was never truly being filled. And in that quiet, beautiful freedom, you realize the power was never in their return. It was always in your release. Thank you.